This war that we're in today may be the most dangerous period our country's been in since the Civil War.
We're in a fundamentally new global environment, an environment where, frankly, peace is no longer the default condition.
There is no room for error here. Error equates into a loss of life, and we have to do everything we can to equip the supply, man, fuel, fix, and arm the soldiers and give them the best capability as they go into the war fight.
To the extent that we do not transform, we are fixed targets. Sooner or later, the enemy will strategically outflank us.
The battlefield is everywhere, our enemies elusive. Beyond our conventional adversaries, we now face an enemy who fights asymmetrically, attacking us and what we stand for. For most of our lives, the default has been peace. Now, it is conflict. We are a nation at war, and we are an army that must change.
The enemy's a little bit different. He arrays himself differently. He has different purposes, different combinations. He'll have different techniques, different styles. We have to understand those techniques and styles very quickly and come up with our own solutions for how to counteract them.
It requires that we be able to adapt, but it doesn't necessarily require that we fight the way they fight. The very reason they're being asymmetric is because they can't confront our own strengths.
The lesson we've learned in Iraq and Afghanistan today is that the front is everywhere, that the enemy is embedded in the population, and at any time or place, whether it be a convoy, a headquarters, a building, or a back alley, a young soldier, regardless of his or her MOS, is facing the probability that he or she will have to act as a rifleman.
The Army has laid out a very ambitious plan for its transformation. It's laudable. It will take us toward a force with increased viability across a broader array of threats into the future.
You can't make these kind of changes outside the context of war. War provides the focus, it provides the impetus, it provides the resources that are required to do it.
It provides us the opportunity to have forces not only engaged, but whenever they come back, fundamentally change them, reorganize them, train them, and then be able to provide and expand that pool of available forces.
At the heart of this transformation is the Army Campaign Plan and its three pillars: modularity, stabilization, and rebalancing. Modularity is reshaping our Army into a more flexible fighting force, giving the battle commander the tools he needs to get the job done. A key element is the brigade unit of action.
The unit of action concept is probably one of the best things that the Army has come up with. It has our support attached to us at all times.
In modularity, we are creating a new focus for our organizations based on brigade combat teams that allow us fundamentally to plug and play into any combat operation based on tailored and scalable forces.
You're the last vehicle, so ideally in a real...
Stabilization allows soldiers to train and fight together longer, creating true unit-based cohesion and more lethal and effective units.
They're going to know each other, they're going to know how their teammates are going to react, they're going to know how their squad mates are going to react, and I think that we're going to have much more effective battalions and brigades as a result of having some stability.
The new shape of our Army will also require us to restructure and rebalance the composition of many of our units. This will give us more of the units we need, such as MPs and civil affairs, with a structure where the reserve component more closely resembles the active.
This is an Army at war for a nation at war, and the Army Reserve is an integral part of that Army. But to sustain that and to retain our position as an integral, skilled-rich component of that Army, then we must make substantive changes in the way that we organize the force, man it, train it, and prepare it for battle.
We're looking for the Guard to contribute across the Army's range of missions. And that includes the homeland. That includes the deployed theater. It includes our contribution to the Army's mission, wherever that may take us.
think the Army's headed in exactly the right direction. And this does not mean that they're coming from the wrong place. It means that the Army's looking to the future, the kinds of capabilities our nation is going to need, and adjusting their capabilities to that.
Managing this change successfully will take us to our ultimate goal, a campaign-quality Army with joint and expeditionary capabilities.
This means for the soldier that he or she is involved not only in initial combat operations, but in the stability and peacekeeping operations that are a traditional follow-on.
The nature of our enemy also dictates that we be expeditionary.
Let's go!
Prepared to go at a moment's notice, capable of neutralizing any threat anywhere.
We're not sure who they are, we never know where they are, but what we know is when, because it's now. And we're engaged in that fight, we're engaged it all over the world, and we require expeditionary forces at a very high level of readiness because they have to be able to run to that fight, get there, and prosecute it immediately on arrival.
Over the years, we've become increasingly efficient at joint operations. This is leading to a level of service interdependence that today's environment demands.
There's always a certain amount of friction, even with the new technology and the new interdependence, and there probably always will be. But the fact of the matter is that we saw more joint interoperability in Operation Iraqi Freedom than we've ever seen before.
We are always going to fight as a joint force, and that joint force brings with it a set of capabilities that is more than just what the individual services bring to the force. The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
Specifically, we must achieve 5 joint and expeditionary interdependencies: joint fires and effects, joint battle command, joint force projection, joint air and missile defense, and joint sustainment.
The soldier that picks up a hand mic and calls for fire, for example, that soldier doesn't care if the fire is being delivered by a 155 self-propelled howitzer, does not care if it's being delivered by an Apache attack helicopter, an F-16 or Tomahawk cruise missile. He doesn't care. What he cares about is that fire is responsive and it provides the effect that he wanted to achieve on the battlefield.
Joint Battle Command is absolutely the heart and soul of achieving this future joint interdependent capability. It is the heart and soul of the integration of all of our services, and it is a vehicle by which we ensure not only our inter-service interdependence, but also our interagency, joint and multinational coalition capability for effectiveness in operations.
When you look as far back as Desert Shield, Desert Storm, we were able to deploy, receive, stage, integrate, and onward move our forces at a very set and deliberate pace. That's no longer the case. Our enemies will not allow that, and to be able to compensate for that, our deployment processes, our deployment platforms, and our deployment doctrine has got to increasingly become joint, totally interdependent, and we've got to replace a lot of time with speed.
In order to achieve these capabilities, we will need to leverage and increase the network centricity that already exists in joint air and missile defense operations with communication systems that allow real-time engagement, real-time surveillance, and real-time sensor-to-shooter links.
Whether it's a requirement for repair part, ammunition, food, water, whatever it is in the logistics arena, we must know what they need when the need arises. So we have taken the initiative to get our logisticians connected in a non-line-of-sight, satellite-based network that allows this logistics information to pass rapidly in real time off the battlefield.
The days of inter-service rivalries are behind us. We are engaged in a continuous, protracted conflict that involves a war of ideas. We all fight as a part of a joint team.
We will only succeed at the monumental task of transforming the Army through the strength of our soldiers, their warrior ethos, Soldiers' creed and Army values are constants, even as the Army changes around them.
You cannot strike one terrorist in a hostile population from 20,000 feet. You can't do it from 30 miles away. The one soldier in that community can do that. He can discriminate the target, and he can deal with it effectively.
And that's what will make the Army relevant, is an Army that not only has the physical attributes and the organizational attributes to be this adaptive, but is led by people that are adaptive and manned by people that are adaptive and comfortable with operating in this complexity.
Surprise has not been eliminated from the battlefield, and that's why it's all the more important that junior officers and NCOs be able themselves to put these pieces together as the situations change and as they require, even when prior information hasn't made it possible.
We can have a lot of planes, helicopters, tanks, Bradleys, whatever, but it's the soldier who makes the difference, carries the day, and produces a strategic outcome. Properly equipped, properly trained, living Army values.
We can give them as much or as little technology, but at the end of the day, it's the brain that's inside the Kevlar and behind the rifle that's going to make the difference.
We sometimes hear about the greatest generation and those wonderful Americans who fought and won World War II, and they'll always be my heroes. But these young people today who volunteered to serve in the military while our country's at war are following in their footsteps, and they're living up to that same legacy.
We have to be successful. The country counts on the Army to win. And not just the Army, the military. We cannot tie, we cannot lose, we have to win.
Are you wearing your dog tags?